Hi everyone, Elizabeth here. So I want to do this video in regards to talking about how self-destruction is often caused by a lack or unresolved trauma or childhood wounds that are often compensated or coped with through self-destructive tools. So the last video I talked about was more about destruction versus creation energy and being on this earth plane. This is not the soul's home. This is our learning school or our playground for soul development and growth, that we have to understand that this earth plane is often run by those powers that be that are more satanic or lower frequency or energy in nature. And a lot of what we've been under over the last several decades have been socially engineered forms of self-destruction. We are bombarded by movies, media, magazines that often show us how to deal with life situations through self-destructive tools. Like, for example, I've shared this in other videos, most Hollywood movies that you see, when somebody's had a stressful day at work, they'll go to the bar and drink away their stress. Maybe they'll end up picking up somebody. A lot of that satanic realm, Satan was the liberator against God's oppression. So you have to understand that there's a difference between spiritually liberating yourself, but a lot of the quote unquote liberation that we find through the social engineered constructs like media and movies is not for our liberation, but it's actually for self-destruction. A lot of people tend to naturally and subconsciously adopt self-destructive types of food. Like, talked about this with the obesity epidemic in this city, in this country, is not caused from a lack of food in this country. You do not have a country with predominantly obese and morbidly obese people who are, most of the population is over 200 pounds. You do not have that in a country that is lacking food. Obviously, that food is lacking nutrients and actual quality ingredients. It's pretty much plastic in an edible form. And a lot of people are choosing to eat this because they don't know any better, or they're not taught, like, hey, all of this food is super acidic, which contributes to things like cancer. So they are constantly adopting self-destructive diets. The standard American diet is very self-destructive, that will hinder their health long term. Health is wealth. Health is the greatest thing that you can have. Now, the other thing that you have to know, it takes 21 days at least to build a habit. So when people have a issue in their life and they're getting triggered, like, for example, if you have that bad day at work, or somebody calls you fat and you get triggered emotionally, you have developed a habit towards, say, reaching out to fast food to cope for your emotions. You have a habit of eating ice cream at 2 a.m, this secret eating at 2 a.m. to eat to cope your emotions. I've done videos on this years ago. We are living in an era of being emotionally high addicts. The only emotional high that our ancestors had many, many years ago was through sex and procreation, of having a baby. Now today, when we are hit emotionally through our fast food or through the pinging of our phone, through the likes on Facebook, likes are the new currency. It's not Bitcoin, it's popularity, it's likes. We are now emotionally hooked into the system, and the system is continuously to self-destruct us on many, many platforms. And when we are not constantly getting hit emotionally through the dopamine hits of getting high, we tend to be more and more addicted to it. So a lot of people, through what I've learned of hearing stories, my friends, personal training people, most people have deep-seated unresolved wounds. Specifically, most have unresolved childhood trauma or unresolved emotions that come from a traumatic experience, say something like a death of a loved one or a divorce, and they adopt the things that they know and see to help them feel better about themselves. And when you do not give any sort of precedence to personal growth or spiritual growth or figuring out your shit because, you know, it has a stigma like, oh, I'm not the one messed up, or I don't need this, that's stupid, you tend to continue the path of self-destruction. If you look at various categories or just notions of 17, let's just talk about some symptoms and habits of self-destructive people. They have self-defeating mindsets. They fail to take any action in their life. They overeat, they undereat, forced incompetence, going out of your way to harm others, self-harm, self-pity, drug and alcohol abuse, social suicide, hiding emotions, refusing to be helped, unnecessary sacrifice, spending too much money, physical neglect, mental neglect, sabotaging relationships. If you start to look at that, you can see how it's really bad, not only because we have generations of trauma, especially in America with all the war, you know, Vietnam War, World War II, World War I. All you got to do is keep going back every generation or every decade and start to see how much how much chaos and war and shit food and the hippies getting high and stuff like that in the 60s and 70s. All you got to do is look at that and kind of some similarities of propaganda and government operations and just start to see how we continuously have gone down and down and down. If you start to analyze Fred Astaire from the 1950s, how everything was at least like people, you know, presented themselves nice, to like 1990s grunge bands, you see a completely different type of man. Men used to be men, now they were promoted to be more man-child little boys. I will share a brief example. One lady that I personal trained was a sugar addict. I have years of training her. I got her to go to acupuncture finally after like 3 years and going to some energy healer, psychic massage therapist. She finally got to admit, after all the years of personal training, acupuncture, all this stuff, finally it came out that all of her problems were because of unresolved issues because her father left the family. I had friends in my rock climbing group who were polyamorous and kind of heavy, more psychedelic drug users. The girl had issues because her mother was really cold, was more narcissistic in nature. So what she has done was run to men to get comfort. It's like that energy balance switch. She didn't get that maternal love. So now she was trying to run and find it through men and dabbling into bisexuality, trying to find herself through a lot of drug use. And pretty much once she hit rock bottom, she chose to progress and ascend herself. But at some point, people tend to continue on the self-destructive train until they get to the points of being at the rock bottom. Either you stay there or you choose to ascend and move on. But we have to have higher awareness, because do we really have to self-destruct ourselves entirely in order to find ascension and personal spiritual growth? I don't think so, but I'm not judging it because we've all been there. I've hit rock bottom in my life. I've seen this as somebody who's been divorced. I completely healed myself through, hiking the Camino and all these non-traditional ways, massage therapy and stuff. I healed myself from divorce because I also looked in the mirror and looked at things that were lacking in the relationship, lacking in my own life, or my own selfishness that contributed to the fall of this marriage. So you have somebody with this perspective, but I look at other people who've had other perspectives, that they get divorced and they're like, oh, marriage is just stupid. It's just, not for me. It's completely dumb. It's like, well, they're completely not even personal growth type people. So they're already kind of lower in general because they're in this different mindset. But then they just think marriage is the problem. They don't look at the man and the woman or the partner in the relationship to see like what personality conflicts, what lack of communication there was, what lack of compatibility was there. Instead of looking at these things, they just blame marriage like it just doesn't work. And our society in general has been more and more self-destructive through the political sphere. If you start to look at one side of the spectrum, specifically, let's just say progressives, or you see a lot of feminists, I personally see a lot of people with unresolved trauma and wounds. People do not have to go, confident people do not have to go online and seek sympathy through social media or have their voices heard. They don't have to, be the loudest one in the room to get attention. When people are reaching out to social media to get attention, it's because there's something lacking within them. Often it's self-worth or self-love, or they're just so fueled and blinded by the ego that it's, the AI intelligent part of their brain is like this crippling handicap that has no higher wisdom. It's just operating through survival mode and just through like rants online. So what I've seen is these traumatic and chaotic experiences often are coped through something through the material realm that is not through healing, but through feeding the flesh and feeding the emotions. That becomes a habit for most people. And that habit is really, really, really hard to break. I don't believe in learning life lessons through Hollywood, but if you start to look at something like Mad Men, that was a brilliant show created to kind of show, like Don Draper had all this messed up childhood stuff and how he was just this rampant cheater and just became a slave to the material world and through money and abundance and just, hurt people in his tracks, specifically his wife and his own family, by sleeping with other people. Was he a slut? Maybe, but most of the issues come from unresolved wounds and trauma, for in his case, childhood trauma, and not having supportive, loving parents. So understanding the theory is easy. It's the how that is complicated for most people. And that how you get over these things is not going to always be an easy choice. You might have to do counseling. You might have to do some meditation. You might have to do a spiritual journey like hiking the Camino. You might have to just get more in touch with nature, start a garden, get your hands planted into the earth to start to heal yourself and disconnect a little bit less from the material world. So most people, unbeknownst to them, are adopting self-destructive behavior, self-destructive tools, especially if they're just, supporting the most satanic industries like eating fast food and drinking Coca-Cola, everything that has been there to hurt you and harm you and contribute to self-harm. People adopt it like it's nothing. Like, oh, it's not that bad because it's on the market. Pharmaceuticals, for example, perfect example. It wouldn't be on the market if it wasn't bad for you, right? No. The truth is constantly getting exposed and people don't want to seek it because they're blinded by the false light. So I hope the last